This is a sequoia. Today is September 16th, 2016, third day in a row I've encountered somewhere in the Puget Sound area, Pacific Northwest, either a redwood or a sequoia. This is a giant sequoia, and we learned about it because a friend we were staying with last night here in Portland, this is Portland, Oregon, I was reporting to her about the giant redwood at Seabeck, which she was already aware of, and she said, "Oh, here's a giant sequoia at the home of a friend of mine. This is just 3 blocks from her home." These things are everywhere. Redwoods and sequoias are absolutely everywhere in the Pacific Northwest. So I'll get a few close-ups of the leaf structure here and this beautiful bark on how large this tree is. But thank goodness we already have full evidence that Sequoia genus, Sequoia dendron genus here, do just fine in the Pacific Northwest. Let's honor them. Welcome to episode 9C of the Climate, Trees, and Legacy video series. This section on sequoias and redwoods of California moving up to the Pacific Northwest in this century of rapid climate change. Today is August 19th, 2017, and it's almost a year since you saw my excitement alongside that giant sequoia in Portland, Oregon. Right now, my husband and I are blessed to be in redwood country, Humboldt County, California, where we are house sitting for 6 weeks. We're blessed not just to be in the redwoods, but I just checked the weather report, and the high, as usual, is going to be about 63 degrees Fahrenheit today, and that compares 35 degrees lower than the high that's scheduled for today, 5 hours southeast of here, where I was doing some narration in the previous episode. That was in Upper Lake, California. 35 degrees difference. And that is the reason there are redwoods here, native here, redwood country, Humboldt County. It's the fog. This is a bit of video I took this morning from the porch right here, east of Eureka. The sun came out early today, about 10 a.m., but it usually only lasts a few hours before the fog creeps back in. And that's why this is redwood country. It's because of the fog. Despite the long summer drought all along the coast of California, despite that drought, here we get fog. We're so close to the coast in Northern California, and that fog accumulates on the leaves of redwood trees, like this one right behind me, accumulates on those leaves and settles into droplets. And so the trees are able to produce rain from the fog. This is the third segment in the group of videos and commentary that show how well California's 2 most magnificent conifers, the coast redwood and the giant sequoia of the Sierras, can already grow in the changing climate of the Pacific Northwest. The implication is that in the decades ahead, these 2 giant conifers of California will become climate refugees, and that a place for them to take refuge, where they'll still be able to thrive, will probably be the Pacific Northwest, and well into Canada too. About a year ago, I began filming examples of California's coast redwoods and giant sequoias thriving in Portland, Oregon, and northward along the edges of Puget Sound. Having lived in Seattle for 5 years in the mid-1980s, I already knew that there were redwoods and sequoias in the area. But back then, back in the mid-80s, just casually talking to people, they seemed to believe that, yeah, people would plant them, but every 20 or 30 years there'd be some cold mass coming down from the Arctic, and that would be toast for them, or at least it would really prune them back. Not so anymore. And in fact, given the ages of some of these trees, it's never been so. Be forewarned that the names can be misleading. Scientifically, The coast redwood is genus Sequoia, while the giant sequoia is Sequoia dendron. I'd like to reach back for a moment and explain how this Redwood Sequoia series differs from the previous 8 components of the Climate, Trees, and Legacy video series I've been doing since January 2014. Now, the way it differs is that here, unlike the other regions of the USA where I was looking at native trees and who was going to suffer from climate change and where they ought to go, here, the coast redwoods are already in the Pacific Northwest. They're already where they need to go. For some reason, landscapers in previous decades felt they would be not only a good street tree, but people who owned large estates planted them as well. We'll see many examples of that in this video. Here's a list of the focal species in each of the previous 8 video themes. Those are the species for which I was basically saying, get moving, and get them moving now, because they weren't already in the north. You can easily access any of those videos by clicking on the Climate, Trees, and Legacy web address listed in the YouTube caption below. So this is the first of the tree-specific videos that I don't have to focus on the scientific papers, the maps projected by researchers of how native range is going to move for some of the trees in the USA. I don't have to focus on that for 2 reasons. One, the scientists are reluctant to produce those maps because climate researchers haven't yet told them where's the fog going to be. And for redwoods in particular, fog is what counts. And so if there's not going to be fog in Puget Sound, they can't say for sure whether they're going to be able to go there. And if the fog isn't going to be lost from Northern California, if this area won't suffer as much from climate change as many other parts in the USA are projected to suffer, then the trees will be able to live here. So the researchers have kind of stayed out of it. Nonetheless, we can see that if redwoods and sequoias do need to move, thankfully, they are already in abundance in Portland, Oregon, and in points north. We'll start our journey in the city of Tacoma, south of Seattle, Washington. Keep in mind, this is not an exhaustive survey of urban trees. It is just a sample to establish beyond any doubt that the 2 giant conifers of California do just fine hundreds of miles north of their historically native ranges. And in a future video, I'm going to focus on paleoecology. I'm going to focus on the fossil evidence of why, even though giant sequoia and coast redwood of California are not historically native to Puget Sound and points north, they are deep time natives. They've been there before, here in North America in warmer times past, and the fossil evidence proves that. Frankly, there are already so many plantings of old sequoias and old redwoods in urban neighborhoods that I really didn't search them out. We had to be there anyway. We were visiting friends, we were house sitting, and my husband had several speaking events in area churches. And so I just basically looked around wherever we were. That's what all this video footage will be. In fact, the initial videos will start off, I think, with 3 neighborhoods that are in the vicinity of churches where my husband was speaking. Let's get started. Now we'll take a look at just one small neighborhood of Tacoma, Washington, south of Seattle. Tacoma Unitarian Universalist Church, visible near the bottom of this aerial photo, is our reason for being there. Before the church service started, I filmed 2 magnificent sequoia trees within just a few blocks of the church. We begin with the tree on the far left. December 4th, Sunday morning, Michael and I are at the Tacoma Unitarian Universalist Church behind me. He's here to give a sermon this morning. Ecology is the New Theology will be its title. And I think that's a sequoia. Let's go take a look. Yes, indeed. This is a sequoia. First, take a look at the leaves here. And now, in there with the bark. Beautiful tree. Here's a treat. I have some cones I can collect here. Look at that. So it's right next to this house, 5211. Not sure what the street is here, but the Tacoma Unitarian Universalist congregation is right down at the end of this street. Big street crosses there. One street over, I see another, pretty sure it's a sequoia, compact. Let's take a look at the leaves off to the side here. All right, come into focus. There they are. What do we have? Yep, those look like sequoia leaves. This is just one street over. I was walking back and saw this at the skyline. It's in somebody's backyard, so I can't get real close. That is a sequoia. And here's the main road, and just off that way over there is the church. And the sequoia I visited was over there somewhere. Looking from above, that second giant sequoia is far left. The church is labeled far right. Take a moment to notice all the tall conifers in this old working-class neighborhood. Google Maps like this one are easy to use online, and one could easily chart all the old sequoias in urban areas of the Pacific Northwest just by using the zoom feature in 3D. So that's all we're going to look at in Tacoma. We'll return to Portland at the end of this video. For now, let's head north to a very old neighborhood of Seattle, Capitol Hill. This next old tree is truly a street tree. It was planted between the street and the sidewalk, and so that makes it city property. And there, we're going to make an interesting observation. Here we are, Sunday, December 18th, Capitol Hill in Seattle. This is at the corner of Prospect and 18th, and that's Michael giving a little love to this gorgeous sequoia. This is just 2 blocks from where he was doing the Sunday service this morning and then gave a program. And as usual, I'm always go out if the weather's good and search the neighborhood and look for sequoias, and by golly, I got one here. So let's go take a closer look at what its roots are doing here. Here we are right at the curb of the road here, and take a look at how it seems to be very well mannered of not coming over here, not disrupting the road. Look at the beautiful red color there. And then over on this side, I mean, it takes the entire way from the road to the sidewalk area here. Let's pause here to just take in what we've seen about the rooting behavior of giant sequoia. As I said, it's very well mannered, and that becomes important. What you're going to see is there are fewer redwood trees that have been planted, at least as straight trees, that is, at least very close to the streets themselves, in the Pacific Northwest. And that may have something to do with the fact that giant sequoias have a taproot, and that means it goes straight down and deep. In contrast, I'm going to show you a video I've made a few days later. Still walking along the logging road. Here's another opportunity to see how the roots of a once giant redwood grow. This one too has been logged a ways up. Look at the angle those roots come out. Michael, could you walk up there so I get some scale? Meanwhile, I'll go to the top here. That's where it was cut off. All right, here's Michael for scale. Yeah, these are really, really big roots. Here's where they come in contact with clay-rich soil. And then here's where they got cut off in order to make the road. August 21st, 2017. Not doing any forestry right now. What we're doing is sitting in a utility line area. Clearing, yep. Because right straight overhead there is a sun that's about 1/3 of the way eaten into. What's surprising is it's eaten into from the 2 o'clock area. Mm-hmm. Here we are, it's east of Arcata and Eureka, California. We're probably up about 1,200 feet elevation. We came up this logging road in order to try to get above the fog, and sun is mostly out. It's a great viewing through these glasses for viewing the eclipse. 88% totality. You can hear the logging trucks heading downhill in the background. Birds. We'll stay here a little while longer, and then we'll head down along the utility road here, head back to campus, because there's something about the roots of Coast Redwoods that I want to show there. It's about 15 minutes after peak. We're getting ready to leave and just stood up from this spot and notice that's where a lot of the locals had gathered to watch it. And look at the fog bank here. There. We're slightly in the fog here, but not enough to block the sun. Still August 21st, 2017. We just came down from 1,200 feet higher elevation. I'm at Humboldt State University right now. Totally fogged in here, 57 degrees, it's cold. We were lucky to see the 88% peak of the partial solar eclipse up at 1,200 feet. But what I'm doing here is pointing out what redwoods can do. This parking area here, it's got roots that have upended. Back there as well are some roots in here. And I don't know, I would imagine these trees were here before this was paved. And what redwoods do that sequoias do not is they're really interested in attaching to their neighbors. They're only sturdy by holding on their roots together. So this one would have been attached to there and over to here. So it may be that they already had their roots shallow and attached, and then the pavement came on. Or it may be that they just traditionally will do this, even if the pavement was here first and then they were brought in. But this may be a reason why in Puget Sound, when I look around urban neighborhoods, the giant sequoias, rather than the coast redwoods, are the ones that people seem to choose when you've got a lot of pavement around. Now let's return to the end of the video I made in the Capitol Hill neighborhood of Seattle. And what's lucky is that about a half a block over in this direction, we saw another huge sequoia. This one's way up in somebody's property, so I didn't get a look at the base, but this will do. So you know that there's some cross-pollination that can happen around here. I saw a few other ones too, but this one This one's really with the giant base. And I, as always, picked up a few cones. I tried to pick up the ones that they no longer had any green on them, of course, but hadn't split open too wide, so that maybe there are some viable seeds left in there. The next video sequence will take us into the southern reaches of the Seattle metropolitan area. We house sat there for 10 days and thus had the chance to discover quite a few old plantings in the neighborhood. This time we filmed some coast redwoods as well as giant sequoias. July 6th, 2017. This is the Normandy Park neighborhood west of SeaTac Airport, just south of the main part of Seattle. And we're staying in this neighborhood for about 10 days, and I've noticed this, to me, looks like it could be a sequoia. Certainly no other native species here, native to the North America, has that structure, that shape to it. But I'm going to be walking this neighborhood here in our typical morning or evening walk, and I noticed some one sequoia, I think, maybe two, and 3 redwoods, and that's just walking the neighborhood right out of this house. Very typical for Seattle, and these are all trees that were planted quite a long time ago. So let's head off on a walk. And here in the neighborhood we have a redwood with a lot of new growth. Look at that. When they get this big, you can never confuse them with a Pacific yew, ever. And you can see it's just growing right in this neighborhood. Got a couple nice old western red cedars, a lot of other really lovely conifers. Pause here for an osprey in the neighborhood. Again, we're really close to the coast here. We're going to walk down to the beach. So we visited that redwood just uphill on Southwest Normandy Terrace. Marine View Drive Southwest is what we're turning onto, and we're going to see some more redwoods there and sequoias as we head down towards the water. Pause here at the intersection before we head down to the coast and see sequoia and redwoods. And we're going to be heading down that way to the community park. But right here, both of those trees there, just the shape. Oh my God, there's a third one too, possibly in the middle. But those two with the very pointy tops, no native trees here have quite the same. And so almost surely sequoias. Yes, indeed, that is a sequoia. This is a fabulous sequoia tree. Let's see if there's any cones on the ground. Heading into the cove. This is a community. Everybody in the community gets to use this facility, and I know we'll see some redwoods on the way out and 1 or 2 sequoias on the way in. We're here in the community park, and here's a sequoia right in front. Typical structure to it, and I've seen this one before in a walk, but I hadn't noticed this one. Look at this one. This one had its top sawed off. We'll go take a closer look at the base of this one. And here its base is right along a little creek there where the light is showing up. And take a close look at the branches here, the leaf structure. So here's that big one with the missing top, and just realized why it was that it had a missing top. It used to be an estate of some sort, and they built in a community center here. Here's an old basketball tennis court down near where the park starts on this side. You can hear kids in the swimming pool to the left. But there are 3 stems of redwoods there. You can see one right above the chimney there, 2 over here. Let me head in a little bit here. Okay, there we go. Oh yeah, very characteristic leaf structure of redwoods. So we got 3 that have been planted right along the edge of this old, once basketball court, tennis court, from an old estate here, fallen into disuse. I missed this one on the way down. This is another. Now this is the classic shape and bunchiness of a giant sequoia. Let's go take a look at the trunk. Kind of hard to see it there. That is a really big tree. And right down below me here, I see a cone. Giant Sequoia. Notice the red-colored winged seeds between the scales. One last tree to look at. We're coming back to the circle terrace. I couldn't have seen these off our porch to the right, but these are giant sequoias. Here's where we've been. Let's head up to Bellingham. But first, we're going to do a drive-by by one giant sequoia en route to the ferry terminal at Mukilteo, which is the way that you get across Puget Sound to get to Whidbey Island. Heading towards Mukilteo ferry station there, and by golly, that sure looks like a giant sequoia. It's Whidbey Island directly across there.
Tolem Park, T-O-L-E-M.
Oh, well, look at that, Tolem Park. Okay, let's see what we got there. Single stem. Wow, what a beauty. Yeah, oh, look at that. Nice. Yeah. Just about a block away from the Unitarian Universalist Church of Bellingham, Washington. And I saw this on the skyline as we got in the parking lot. I'll go up close and take a look. But it is a beauty. Okay, it's a giant sequoia, Sequoia dendron. I should have guessed by how much the shape, first of all. but by how much the trunk flared out. That brilliant red and really sturdy flaring trunk there. And the cross streets near here, Farragut, and it looks like it's either I Street or First Street. And there's a second one right on the right. I just went back around the street, turned the corner. The one on the left is the one I was just looking at, right in there. And this one is that beautiful, beautiful cone shape. I'll walk around the other side, see if I can see the trunk there. So here is the second one. Let's return to Portland, Oregon, where this video began. The same giant sequoia tree has some very interesting neighbors. Here's that sequoia in the center of the picture. It's at 4300 Parkview, Portland, Oregon. And by golly, there's a lot of them here in the Pacific Northwest of sequoia and sequoiadendron. Just about everybody knows where to find one. Glory, glory, we just drove on to the end of the block, getting ready to head back to the highway, and look what we see right here. That's a coast redwood, and here's an aerial photo of it via Google Maps. Notice from the view above that the coast redwood lacks the classic solid cone shape that is diagnostic of its cousin from the Sierras. Here's a street-level photo of its top. And take a look at the pebble base set back from the pavement of the road. The orange of the shed branchlets are easy to see from the air, too. Now look to the right beyond center and see that pair of giant sequoias at the end of 86th Avenue. West Slope neighborhood, 86th Avenue, and Birchwood. Look how giant these are. My gosh. While filming these neighborhood trees, a couple walking their dog came by, learned what I was filming, and told me of an even more magnificent stand of planted trees nearby at the location in Portland shown on this Google Maps view.
There's so many in the area. There's a school, a Valley Catholic school, that has a whole row of them that are just huge.
Basically, the street in front of the high school is this whole row of these things.
They're probably 70, 80 years old.
Of huge redwoods.
Wow. Whenever we pass through Portland, we usually stay in the guest room of our friend Milt Markowitz. And this time I was on the watch for redwoods and sequoias, and just watch how much we found right out the door. November 9th, here on the west side of Portland, Oregon, taking a beautiful walk about 3 blocks from our host's home here. And of course, what do we run into? A pair of sequoias. Portland and sequoias totally go together. Here are the tops of that same pair of giant sequoias. That's Michael for scale. And now a close-up. Just uphill and around the curve from here on Northwest Cumberland Road is where that pair of sequoias are. November 10th, 2016. Our host home is just about a block that way. I walked this way yesterday and I didn't notice these leaves. And I looked up and it's like, oh my God, here's a redwood. And I'll do a close-up on this. This is ginormous. It's about 5 feet diameter. It's too vertical up here for me to get to be able to step up there, but I'll show you a close-up. Here we are, Redwood, Portland, Oregon. Look at this. Beautiful, beautiful. Yeah, I'll get a shot up here. Beautiful, beautiful redwood. Here he is. All right. Wow. That is a beautiful.
It could be 6 foot diameter.
Yeah. All right, I'm going to back up here because what I noticed as I crept forward is, look at, this is what redwoods do. I imagine sequoias too, but I've seen this along the California coast. Look at this. What we have down here is a burl. Do you see that? Rocks along the edge here, but this is the lignotuber, the burl. They're capable, if trunks get cut down, of keep coming back. And so even the ones that are old growth could have been coming back from, you know, something that happened to the trunk 5,000 years ago. All right, let me do a close-up on these really vibrant leaves that we've got here. Look at that. Redwood tree here on the West Hills District, north-facing slope. Happy with that. Portland, Oregon. And a little down the hill here on Northwest Cumberland Road. I noticed this. We're not going to hike up to there, but that is the classic shape, not of a redwood, but of a sequoia. I have a much harder time being able to definitively see redwoods at a distance, but that for sure is a sequoia here in Portland, Oregon. December 5th, snowing here in West Hills, part of Portland. Just pulling out of the driveway here, and I noticed, look at that beautiful sequoia here in the neighborhood. That top, and being so thick like that, there's just nothing else it can be. Sequoia. Portland, Oregon. First snow of the year. One more sequoia data point to add about Portland. This one I read about a year ago when I first Googled sequoia in Portland. 3 giant sequoias on private land were scheduled for removal by a developer. Neighborhood protests and even tree sits ensued. I never visited the site, but just yesterday I used Google Maps to see where it was. And on one of the rotations of Google Maps, notice what pops up. Save the Giants Park. Time to sum up. Obviously, this was not a complete survey of coast redwoods and giant sequoias, but you can go online and take a look at the Monumental Trees website. There you can put in country, you can put in state, you can even put in county and put in species. Here's a couple examples of giant sequoias in the areas I visited. Look how many individuals I haven't even seen. You can actually find a lot of giant sequoias, though not the coast redwoods, by going onto Google Maps and clicking the 3D function to examine tall trees and zoom in from a low aerial angle. Again, the reason I don't think you can find the redwoods is that they resemble too closely the Douglas firs, just in their shape. When you think you've spotted some giant sequoias on the Google map, go and take a look. See if they really are sequoias. And then look and see if they're healthy. See if they're starting to produce cones. See if there's any seeds in those cones. In a later episode, I'll tell you why it is that the sequoia cones tend to not be naturalizing. That is, their seeds aren't going out and producing young ones. Whereas, as we already saw in the first episode, some coast redwoods are able to do that. But again, there's a lot that can be done by citizen scientists just taking a look in your own neighborhood, if you live in the Pacific Northwest, especially the fog belts. One more thing will be important to do if you try to do an inventory of trees, and that is try to get its oral history. Find somebody in the neighborhood who can tell you basically what do they know about when it was planted. if it's had any interventions, whether it was watered in the start, whether it's had any difficulties, whether its roots have caused any problems. For example, remember that big redwood oozing onto the sidewalk in Portland? A neighbor across the street who said he had moved there in 1978 told me that the tree already seemed huge back then. He drew my attention to a storm-injured top that has since regrown a new leader stem. There you can see it. And remember the voices of the couple walking that dog in Portland near the Giant Sequoia? And they told me about the Catholic high school with the huge sequoias. They also told me how all the big trees got into their neighborhood. Before there were houses here, it was golf course, and trees were planted for landscaping. The houses were later built amidst the trees because, obviously, giant trees add to a home's value. Up to a point, you won't find city arborists advocating anymore for the planting of giant sequoia and coast redwood anywhere near houses or streets or sidewalks. It's probably because, in part, we're just a lot more safety conscious now. There's concern about lawsuits if a treetop falls on someone, and certainly if you grow a big tree, think about how difficult it is to remove it if you have to for any reason. The other thing, though, is that cities are becoming more nativist, and that's a good thing in part. Take a look here at Portland. They have a website of recommended trees for the city of Portland, certainly the ones that they'll approve on city property between streets and sidewalks and city parks, but also recommendations for individuals, what to plant too. So what's going to become important in the decades ahead is for people to not only advocate for coast redwoods and giant sequoias in places where they can't fall on folks, but to advocate for them as native species. They are deep-time native species. They've been in Puget Sound before. They've been much further north, too, in very warm episodes of Earth's climate. The fossils show us that that's the case. And in fact, in another video in this series, I'm going to be focusing on the fossil evidence of giant sequoias, metasequoias, and redwoods in the Pacific Northwest and elsewhere. I have one instance of where the exception proves the rule, and that is where there's a very young planting of coast redwoods, and this is in Everett, north of Seattle. Here you're going to see a whole line of young trees that were planted in a development, possibly as a sound barrier, well away from the road. October 15th, just stepped out of the van. We're going to be seeing someone at her home, have dinner with her, and I noticed, look what I see on the ground here, and I go, my God, we got a redwood here. So, got out of the van here and started looking around, and look at that right over there. We've got a group of 6 redwoods. There we have a whole line of redwoods. This one's got some cones. Look at that. There we have it. Some redwood cones. Here's the size of the trunk here. So that's it for episode 9C of Climate Trees and Legacy. The theme, Coast Redwoods and Giant Sequoias. I'm Connie Barlow, and may the forest be with you.